Silent Hill is one of the most popular survival horror franchises of all time. Over 2 decades, it's bound to create such notable moments throughout each game that have the player make such memories for many years to come. However, even though we may have thought we knew everything about this franchise and what it has to offer, that is far from the truth. There is a surprising amount of mysteries, secrets, Easter eggs, and hidden lore that even the biggest Silent Hill fan may not know about, which is what today's iceberg is going to be talking about. To be more specific, the Silent Hill Iceberg. Now, for those unaware as to what an iceberg is, essentially, icebergs are divided into 5 layers, each about such trivia, facts, or lore regarding a subject. In this context, Silent Hill is where we go through well-known information regarding the franchise in the beginning, but as we go deeper into the iceberg, the more obscure and unknown the information becomes. Before we begin, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Reddit user Ciar Moro for creating this iceberg. This iceberg will contain spoilers on the Silent Hill games. Anyways, let's begin. Joke endings. In each Silent Hill game, there are typically joke endings that the player can unlock upon meeting previous requirements in previous playthroughs. A good example of these joke endings is the UFO endings. In Silent Hill 2, you would have to beat the game's 3 main endings to unlock the UFO ending. In doing so, you'll find the channeling stone in the restroom of the observation deck at the beginning of the game in a new playthrough. You'll need to carry this channeling stone to 3 specific locations to use to trigger an event. If done correctly, James will be encountered by aliens, also known as Greys, where he asks if they have seen his wife, Mary. He also encounters Harry Mason, the previous protagonist in Silent Hill 1. Another example of a joke ending is seen in Silent Hill 2 with the dog ending. To get this ending, you need to once again beat the game 3 times and get its 3 main endings. In a new playthrough, you need to go to West South Vale to acquire the dog key at the doghouse. Play through the game as usual up into the Nightmare Hotel sequence. After James watches the VHS tape, head to the observatory deck to get the dog ending. Here, you find out that Mira the dog was the one who orchestrated the events of Silent Hill 2 all along. These are only 2 of many joke endings seen throughout the franchise that I won't be getting into, for the sake of spoilers at least, but these are the most popular joke endings that I can think of. Pop culture references. Silent Hill is known to make lots of references to pop culture throughout most of the games. They are sometimes seen on the streets of Silent Hill 1, as homages to such 90s media, such as The Shining. Other times, the references are made solely through being the inspiration behind the horror itself. Such examples are Jacob's Ladder, a huge fundamental component for inspiring much of the body horror you see in Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3. A good example of this is the head-twitching scene with the first encounter of the lying figure. This is a reference to the head-twitching that is also seen in Jacob's Ladder. The same head-twitching is also seen in the opening of Silent Hill 3 with the Closer. Easter eggs. Silent Hill is known to have some Easter eggs sprinkled throughout each of its games. Whether the Easter eggs are in-universe with references paying respect to their former installment, or other video game franchises that have a reference to Silent Hill. To give a couple examples of such Easter eggs, in Silent Hill 3, there's an Easter egg where if you go to a restroom stall, you have the option to have Heather put her hand in the toilet. If you do so, Heather will try to put her hand in the toilet, but quickly dismiss this idea as she finds it disgusting, questioning who would do such a thing. Tsurushi then looks at the player. This is a reference to Silent Hill 2, where James willingly puts his hand into the toilet to get the locker code. The car James drives to Silent Hill, which is seen in the observation deck at the beginning of the game, is reused as Jasper Gein's car in Silent Hill 4. When you enter the forest world, Henry will walk throughout the Silent Hill forest to stumble upon a car that is similar to James's car. In Metal Gear Solid 3, there are 2 paintings featured from Silent Hill 3 that can be found on the 2nd floor of Graniny Gorky Lab. In the psychological horror game, Visage, you can find room 302 from Silent Hill 4, which shows an exact recreation of the room itself. Secret weapons. Secret weapons in Silent Hill are seen as mostly unlockables that provide a higher damage output or limited ammunition than normal weapons found in previous playthroughs. Depending on the criteria, you have to meet specific requirements to unlock said secret weapon. These secret weapons include the Hyper Blaster from Silent Hill 1, unlocked after achieving the UFO ending, the Hyper Spray from Silent Hill 2, unlocked depending on the ranking achieved after beating a previous playthrough, the Beam Saber from Silent Hill 3, unlocked after beating the game with more melee kills rather than firearm kills, However, you can lock the beam saber by default after completing your second playthrough. Inspirations. It's an understatement to say the least that Silent Hill takes a lot of inspiration from other types of genres in literature or movies that are used as the basis to comprise much of the narrative, symbolism, themes, horror, etc. Such inspirations include Jacob's Ladder, David Lynch films, the Russian novel Crime and Punishment, and Stephen King. Mary in the Back Seat. In Silent Hill 2, at the plot twist, it's revealed that James Sunderland killed his wife, Mary. We also learn that Mary wasn't killed 3 years ago, but rather, very recently, possibly a couple days before the events of Silent Hill 2. Upon initial speculation, it can be speculated that because James had recently killed Mary, her corpse is actually in the trunk of James's car at the beginning of the game. However, if we take a look at the Book of Lost Memories, the novelization of Silent Hill 2, there's a section in the novel called Justice, Book of Lost Memories. This chapter affirms this with the in-water ending. Furthermore, when a Twitter user asked Masahiro Ito about the theory, he stated that he believed Mary's body was actually in the back seat, not the trunk. When questioned how James didn't notice her corpse, Ito replied that James had repressed the memory of her murder. Silent Hill 1 Unused Monsters. It's inevitable for video games to contain some form of unused or cut content that was initially considered at one point during development, but ultimately was scrapped due to unforeseeable circumstances. In this context, Silent Hill 1 has a surprising amount of cut content behind the scenes. When uncovering the game files, it's been found that 7 unused monsters were considered at one point, but ultimately went unused. These monsters in particular are the monkey, the ostrich, the chicken, the frog, the butterfly, the snake, and the manta ray. More recently, when data mining the game files, 2 test models were also discovered that were filed as Big and Spider. However, these most likely were never considered to be actual enemies, merely just testing the model's animations. Ambulance Ending. Back in the late 90s, when the internet was still newly accessible and in the early stages of its life, it was bound that message forums or websites on such topics that fandoms were collectively interested in were inevitably going to get their dedicated server to talk about said topic of interest. This in particular was Silent Hill 1. As Silent Hill 1 was still new at the time, especially during the late 90s into early 2000s. It was only a matter of time before people wanted to talk to others about the story, characters, symbolism, strategy guides, and so much more. However, one interesting topic that was unbeknownst to many people at the time was the ambulance ending. Supposedly, the ambulance ending was one of the secret unlockable endings that the player can unlock in Silent Hill 1. Some players on message forums would comment on claiming to have received a 5th secret ending. According to the rumor, finishing the game on hard difficulty with at least 9 out of 10 ranking will allow the player in the next playthrough to unlock the 5th ending. To do this, you would have to collect the bottle of distilled water and the glucose in the Midwich Elementary School, items that were originally unobtainable before. Upon getting these items, the player would then have to construct an explosive to blow open the traffic gate across from Alchemilla Hospital. Once the explosive goes off and allows you to enter, you would then need to find fuel at the gas station in the resort area later in the game. Finally, once the fuel is acquired, you place it in the abandoned ambulance near the hospital and drive it. Harry would then drive off in the ambulance out of Silent Hill. Now obviously, this quote-unquote 5th secret ending is false and just an urban legend developed by the community. However, even though this is fake, there's an old video back from 2007 titled Silent Hill Ambulance Ending, which goes into detail on how to accomplish the ambulance ending. Laura's Prayer and the Reverse Will. In Silent Hill 2, the soundtrack called The Reverse Will is usually associated with the rebirth ending they listen to during the credits. Now, at first glance, it may not seem like much, just sounds very trip-hop or funky in its sound design. But there's actually a secret message in the song itself that you can hear. When you reverse the song backward, you can make out a voice that is similar to Laura's. In this message, it reads, I pray the Lord, my soul to keep. If I should die, before I wake, I pray the Lord, my soul to take. The lyrics originate from the 18th century children's bedtime prayer, Now Lay Me Down to Sleep, Fukuro. Fukuro is a 3-minute short film developed by Masahiro Ito in 2001. It was released on The Art of Silent Hill, Lost Memories, The Art of Silent Hill, and The Silent Hill Experience. The short film follows the protagonist, Fukuro, in Japanese, bag or sack, where the Fukuro lady is put in these bizarre, disturbing, and surreal positions with the monsters from Silent Hill 2, such as Pyramid Head or the Lying Figure. Lots of the framing is very suggestive, but it's very abstract and uncomfortable in its body horror. Interestingly, some of the monsters are early concepts that didn't make it into Silent Hill 2, such as the box monster, which you can see in the short film and concept art. When asked on Twitter what the purpose and message of the short film Fukuro is supposed to represent, Masahiro Ito states he imagined the womb of a female abstractly. Kiniko, a similar short film titled Kiniko, in Japanese, Mushrooms, is a very abstract and surreal 5-minute short film that is very reminiscent of the previous short film Fukuro. However, the short film is not as nearly disturbing or unsettling in its presentation, rather very odd and bizarre. It follows the toadstools from Silent Hill 4, a recurring enemy that is very tall and lengthy as it sprouts from the ground and blocks your path, requiring you to deal damage to pass through. Much of the short film is just a creative art piece and a form of expression that would promote the track Kiniko on the Silent Hill Soundsbox, a collection of Silent Hill game soundtracks along with new ones. They look like monsters to you. The comment, "They look like monsters to you," is stated in Silent Hill 3 by the character Vincent Smith, a very ominous and mysterious character that you can't get much of a reading on throughout the game as he's very cryptic in his personality. In the final location, the chapel, you run into Vincent in the library. In this cutscene, Heather asks Vincent if she is talking about the, quote, monsters, to which Vincent states, this causes Heather to panic and be disturbed, thinking that she is actually killing humans this whole time. However, Vincent states that it's nothing but a joke. I believe the reason why this entry is here is because of the implications that this gives to the player, questioning if the monsters in Silent Hill 3, or really, any Silent Hill game, that the monsters are actually humans, although this is just merely speculation. Silent Hill 2 minimap. At some point during development, Silent Hill 2 would have featured a minimap that the player could use to navigate the environment. While this may not have been featured as a staple in the main game, it's actually accessible, albeit through a series of complex button combinations on the PlayStation 2. To accomplish this, first, you must have completed the dog ending. After you have completed the dog ending, the controller type must be set to 2 if you're playing on the international versions of the game. Finally, press the following buttons: Start, plus L2, plus Square, plus 3, while simultaneously entering the inventory menu screen, exiting, and holding the start button while exiting. Valtiel revives Heather. In Silent Hill 3, if the player dies, it's possible to get a game over screen where we see Heather being dragged away by one of the monsters, Valtiel. It's assumed that Valtiel revives Heather at a safer location by resurrecting the god inside her. Valtiel is seen as a passive and non-hostile monster to Heather, possibly because he is symbolic of being God's attendant, observing Heather to ensure the birth of God. Drivable School Bus. The drivable school bus is honestly something that I'm not too sure about. The only conclusion I can come to is that this drivable school bus entry refers to the school bus you find in Silent Hill 1. This school bus is located by Midwich Elementary School, and you can actually enter this school bus to collect items if needed. It's possible that much like the ambulance ending, the idea of driving the school bus was also an urban myth that players spread amongst each other as rumors back in the day. Heather can sit. In Silent Hill 3, there is a hidden idle animation that sees Heather sighing after standing for a long period of time, to then crouching down. It's assumed that this idle animation only works in the shopping mall, as other players have posted the same idle animation in different locations of the shopping mall. James looking at the player. In Silent Hill 2, the opening cutscene sees James looking at himself in the mirror, where he then proceeds to brush his hand across his face. There would go on to be a popular fan theory that James is not staring at himself, but rather staring at the player. The reason why fans speculated about this theory is because if you were to enhance the levels and brightness of the image of James looking at himself in the mirror, it looks as if James is looking at the player. However, Masahiro Ito debunks this theory, claiming that James never intended to look at the player, rather just looks at himself. Akihiro Imamura's friend. According to the making of Silent Hill 2, when asked, Akihiro Imamura would comment that the physical appearance and character model of Eddie Dombrowski would be based on his friend, Eddie's van. In Silent Hill 2, when roaming the observation deck, the player can find a white van that is parked near the stairway to the forest. It's speculated that this white van is actually owned by Eddie. In the opening FMV of Silent Hill 2, you can see a cutscene of Eddie and Laura beside the aforementioned white van, where they are talking to each other, although it's not confirmed if this is Eddie's actual van. Lisa cries in Silent Hill theme. In the cancelled Silent Hill /PT, there's the possibility that the player can hear Lisa, the main antagonist, crying in the audio recording via a radio. This would later appear as an Easter egg in Metro Exodus, a post-apocalyptic survival horror game. A video uploaded to Facebook by the user JCSC sees the player entering an abandoned house. When exploring, he reaches a red radio where if you listen closely, you can hear the same audio of Lisa crying from Silent Hill /PT. However, when it comes to Lisa crying in the Silent Hill theme, assuming this refers to Lisa Garland, I couldn't find any evidence of this. Silent Hill 1 through 4, all working by the same rules. I'm assuming this entry is referring to the town of Silent Hill itself when it comes to the fog world, the other world, or the physical manifestations of the monsters being projections of the character's fears, traumas, and desires. These rules also have the underlying theme of the cult, the order, being either direct or referenced in Silent Hill 1 through 4. Room 209 Whisper Origins. In Silent Hill 2, when James finds himself in the Blue Creek Apartments, he eventually finds himself in Room 209. Now, there is the possibility that in Room 209, the player can hear a whisper if they are idle long enough. Initially, when players heard this voice, this of course caused lots of speculation and theories as to what this could mean. One interpretation some users claimed to hear was, "See my dead wife, I'll come home, load some laundry to escape, and maybe take her to the car so it takes some space." In reality, the whisper in Room 209 is nothing more than a voice actor rehearsing his lines, speaking in incomprehensible words or gibberish that would be later used as one of the many random noises you can hear in the game. Moeco Company Images. In Silent Hill 4, when users uncover the game files, they unexpectedly found unused texture assets of two images of anime girls wearing maid outfits. It's unknown why these two texture assets were left in the game files. All that we do know is that these are two characters that originate from the adult visual novel, Moekan. Atlanta 1996 Olympic Games sprites. In Silent Hill 1, when data mining the game files, users found unused images from the Konami IP International Track and Field, a 3D update of Konami's Track and Field arcade series, in which up to 4 players compete in 11 different Olympic events. It appears that International Track and Field would have assets that were later reused for sprites or in-game images in Silent Hill 1, with some left over and unused. Valtael torturing Lisa. While Valtael is seen as passive and non-hostile when it comes to Heather, he is quite the opposite when it comes to the other monsters in Silent Hill 3. If the player were to hack the camera in environments where Valtael is present, you can see that Valtael is physically harassing and abusing them. One of these monsters in particular appears to be a nurse. It might seem odd as to why Valtael is enacting this action, specifically this nurse, but this nurse is supposed to be a physical manifestation of Lisa Garland, as Lisa was Alessa's caretaker and nurse to aid her, while Alessa was bedridden for 7 years. Buttercake. Buttercake is an item that can be found in the Silent Hill games. As far as we're concerned, Buttercake has no relevance to the player, especially when it comes to being an item that heals you or has any purpose whatsoever. However, the Silent Hill community has gone on to make the Buttercake as a running gag where they jokingly try to find all the Buttercakes they can in each of the games. So far, they've only appeared in Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, Silent Hill 4, and as a purchasable DLC artifact that increases the player's stats in the spin-off Silent Hill Book of Memories. Funnily enough, a Tumblr user, Gourmet Gaming, would go on to create an actual recipe to create a real-life buttercake. James adopts Laura. In the Leave ending of Silent Hill 2, after James reconciles and makes amends with his wife's death, Mary, he is later seen leaving the town of Silent Hill, alongside Laura. It's ambiguous as to what happens to them after the events of the game, which can only lead to speculation. One of the popular interpretations is that James would go on to adopt Laura, as it's revealed in Mary's letter that she would have adopted Laura if things were different and she wasn't sick. It's presumed that the most logical outcome is that James would honor Mary's wish by adopting Laura. In your eyes. Unfortunately, I don't have a clue as to what this entry is referring to when it comes to In Your Eyes. All that came up when searching for this entry was the song Room of Angel from Silent Hill 4's original soundtrack. In the song, there is a lyric that reads, "Here's a lullaby to close your eyes," but that's the closest answer I can come to with this entry. Developer's photo in Historical Society. In Lost Memories, Silent Hill Chronicle, it appears that in one of the photos seen in Silent Hill Historical Society is the development staff, Team Silent. Ernest knowing about James. In the sub-scenario for Silent Hill 2, Born from a Wish, the player gets to assume the role of Maria. In Born from a Wish, Maria travels to Baldwin Mansion, where she meets the ghost of Ernest James Baldwin. At some point, Maria needs to collect a white liquid to give to Baldwin to resurrect his deceased daughter. Once Maria gives this to Baldwin, he reveals that a man named James Sunderland is to be avoided as he is a bad man. As to how Baldwin knows about James is left unknown, but it's possible that Baldwin is seen as one of the many manifestations that are brought about the town of Silent Hill, which would explain how it knows about James Sunderland. Silent Hill 4 UFO ending. It's a mystery as to why Silent Hill 4 never got a UFO ending when previous installments did. It can be speculated that due to time constraints during late development refrained the developers from implementing a UFO ending. However, it appears that data mining the game files for Silent Hill 4 reveals unused assets for a scrapped UFO ending. These items in particular are the Channeling Stone, the Dirty Stone, the Courtyard Key, and Red Oil. Calgar Dinok. In Silent Hill 1, the opening FMV has a frame where Harry and Cheryl are driving to Silent Hill. In this frame, the player can see Cheryl clutching onto her sketchbook, called Drawing Block. It's possible that after completing the main story, in the same opening FMV cutscene, the player can find Cheryl's sketchbook titled Calgar Dinok. It can't be assumed that this is a mistranslation or spelling error that happened at some point in development and went unnoticed by Team Silent. Phone caller voice actor. In Silent Hill 3, there is an optional cutscene in Nightmare Brookhaven Hospital, where Heather encounters a telephone call from a mysterious voice. The call that is left is mysterious and unsettling, considering the tone of the voice gives off, which is undoubtedly creepy and I imagine left the player disturbed. It's revealed that the voice actor behind the phone call is Clifford Ripple, the same voice actor who voices Vincent Smith. Mary's murder sound effects. In Silent Hill 2, when James receives the VHS tape and inserts it into the VHS player, it's revealed that James ended up killing his wife, Mary. In this VHS tape, we see frames that are obscured and blurred when James is suffocating his wife with a pillow. The only audio you can hear is the VHS player. Originally, there was a deleted audio recording that was uncovered in the game files. In this audio, you can hear Mary suffocating to death in real time, with muffled screams becoming panicked and slowly subsiding as she passes away. It's very unsettling and upsetting to hear, so if you want to skip this if this is deeply uncomfortable to listen to, please skip to this timestamp. Douglas adopting Heather. During the events of Silent Hill 3, Heather loses her father, Harry Mason. He is killed by one of the monsters, the Missionary, ordered by Claudia as an act of revenge for Harry killing the Incubus in Silent Hill 1. This leaves Heather not only fueled with anger and vengeance to avenge her father, but also leaving her without her only family left. At the end of Silent Hill 3, it's shown that both Heather and Douglas are reunited, safe and sound. It's left ambiguous as to what happens to both Heather and Douglas after the events of Silent Hill 3 as it's never confirmed. However, it can be assumed that Heather would be adopted by Douglas, as I imagine her surviving on her own would be harsh and difficult as she's only 17. Douglas also lost his son years ago and wants to make amends by helping Heather throughout the plot of Silent Hill 3 as a means to avenge his son's death. It would make sense as to why Heather would presumably end up living with Douglas, seeing him as an adopted father figure in her life. Interestingly, Dead by Daylight had a collab with Silent Hill called the Silent Hill Chapter. In this, there is lore that covers the aftermath of Heather Mason and her whereabouts years later after the events of Silent Hill 3, stating that she becomes a volunteer for a crisis center for troubled youth. 3 months later, after studying for training exams, she becomes an official crisis line operator. While the canon is debatable, this is technically a collaboration of Konami, more specifically, Silent Hill. Silent Hill 3 Original Concept. Originally, the plans for Silent Hill 3 were drastically different than the final release of the Silent Hill 3 we ended up getting. When conceptualizing the ideas for Silent Hill 3, Team Silent wanted to incorporate much of the themes from Silent Hill 2 to tell its narrative. However, Konami wasn't pleased with the slow sales for Silent Hill 2 at the time of its release and instead favored a push into making the next installments an arcade-style rail shooter spin-off. Team Silent rejected this pitch by Konami and in trade pushed for a direct sequel to Silent Hill 1, which was decided after much of the reviews for Silent Hill 2 were confused by the sudden story shift from continuing the story from Silent Hill 1. And so, Team Silent opted to continue the storyline and finish the story with the Silent Hill 3 we now have today. Mary's and Harry's wife disease. At some point in their respective lives, Harry Mason and James Sunderland both had happy lives with their wives. Harry's wife is Jodie Mason and James Sunderland's wife is Mary Shepard Sunderland. At some point in both Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2, it's revealed that their wives would undoubtedly succumb to a disease that left them bedridden and would tragically pass away. Albeit, Mary would die at the hands of James, while Jodie's death would presumably be to natural causes at the hands of her illness. However, it's quite a coincidence that both their wives would end up passing away before the events of their respective stories, especially to a disease that is left unknown. The real Michael G. Michael Geen, a retired voice actor, previously voiced Harry Mason in Silent Hill 1. However, during the credits, he is credited as simply Michael G. This would confuse players as there would happen to be another voice actor in video games who also went by the name Michael G, his full name being Michael Goff. However, when asked by fans if Goff voiced Harry Mason, he denies this. Coins encryptions. This entry can lead to one of two things when it mentions coins encryptions, as Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 4, respectively, have coins as items that are needed to access new areas in their games. Silent Hill 2 has 3 coins: Old Man Coin, Prisoner Coin, and Snake Coin. If you look closely, each respective coin has images on it that represent the coin in question: an image of an old man, an image of a woman, and an image of a snake. It's theorized that the prisoner coin is in relation to Angela, as she is symbolically a prisoner at the hands of her father and brother's abuse. What cements this theory is the reverse side of the coin that shows eggs, implying that the abuse of Angela may have led her to a facility at one point. The coin also happens to appear in the room she is in, when James finds Angela holding the knife close by her, contemplating her existence. In Silent Hill 4, there's an item called $1 coin, which is used to retrieve the murder scene key from a vending machine in the subway world. The encryption of the coin shows a symbol that has a 1 in the middle and a $sign overlaying it. Coincidentally, the survival horror game Ruler Rose happens to also have the same encryption in a bathroom you find at some point during the game. There is no God. I'm a bit at a loss as to what this entry could mean, as I don't have a memory of any mention of "there is no God" being commented by a character in any of the Silent Hill games. But I guess that Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3 have a plot that arrives from the birth of a false god in each respective game, that ends up turning into an imperfect being, resulting in the protagonist having to kill them. These quote-unquote gods were predicted to cleanse the world and give birth to a perfect paradise. The outcome of this is the complete opposite. There is also the fact that many of the Silent Hill protagonists suffer the traumatic event at the expense of a tragedy that haunts them, possibly leading them to believe that there is no god. Johnny burned down the hotel. When exploring the basement of Lakeview Hotel, James can find a break room that was presumably for employees to take breaks during their shifts. In this room, the player can examine the heater that reads, "I'm Johnny, one hot guy," implying that the employee who goes by Johnny either caused the fire or was caught in the fire, as the heater potentially could have malfunctioned and caught the curtain on fire, causing the fire to burn down Lakeview Hotel. Further supporting this incident is in Nightmare Lakeview Hotel, where James can find police tape stating, "Warning, fire," and in Toluca Prison in one of the jail cells that shows a painting depicting Lakeview Hotel burning in fire. Newspaper fires cover-up. The newspaper fire cover-up refers to the boiler incident at the Gillespie household, where Alessa Gillespie's body was found charred after the ritual. A memo that can be found in Silent Hill 1 titled Newspaper from 7 years ago reports the same boiler incident that took place at the Gillespie household, stating, Alessa's body was found on the scene. However, this body that was found was a fake, presumably planted to have the public assume Alessa was killed in the fire when in reality she was secretly transferred to a basement in Alchemilla Hospital for 7 years, where she was tortured. Sonic designer was part of Team Silent, the original designer of Sonic the Hedgehog and Dr. Eggman. Naoto Oshima surprisingly would be a part of the development staff for Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 3. Naoto would be credited as the original crew, working as a graphic system programmer for Silent Hill 1 and an effect programmer for Silent Hill 3. Lilith. After the opening cutscene with James staring at himself in the mirror, the player can explore the bathroom stalls to see lots of messages that are either gibberish or nonsensical. However, there is this one message on the bathroom wall that seems to have some meaning behind its message. In a Reddit thread 4 years ago back in 2020, a Reddit user, Extra Gloria, deciphered the message on the wall to uncover that the symbol is based on Hebrew writing. According to them, they found the symbol in one of their books called Kabbalah, which depicts the female demon Lilith. On top of the image of Lilith are 3 figures that are called Sanoi, Sanzanoi, and Simanjalov. There was a hole here. In Silent Hill 2, there's a mysterious message found in Ellie's bar that reads, "There was a hole here. It's gone now." For a long time, this message was left in ambiguity, as it was never truly confirmed as to what the message meant, thus leading to lots of fan theories of speculation, analysis, etc. However, Masahiro Ito recalls the origin of the hole message coming from either environment artist Takashi Miura or scenario writer Hiroyuki Owaku. Masahiro Ito speculated that the message could symbolize that James Sunderland no longer has anywhere to hide from himself. Holes are a motif that appear in Silent Hill 2, as James would subsequently have to jump down the holes to descend to Toluca Prison, and then once again into the labyrinth. Alessa sleep cycles. In Silent Hill 1, the town of Silent Hill has sudden changes that happen periodically throughout the gameplay, where it appears to be foggy and then suddenly shifts into night. The cycle tends to repeat itself as normally, in most Silent Hill games, the player will experience the fog world and then the other world unpredictably. In the context of Silent Hill 1, a proper explanation as to why these sudden environmental shifts happen is due to Alessa Gillespie. This is because Alessa's nightmares from her past trauma and tragedies developed into physical manifestations, seen as monsters or, in this context, the town of Silent Hill itself. Angela sitting across Heather in Happy Burger. In the opening of Silent Hill 3, Heather is seen waking up from a nightmare in the fast food restaurant Happy Burger. It's a very small cutscene that shows Heather gathering her thoughts and collecting herself while she looks out the window, taking out her necklace and remembering she has to get home. What the player doesn't know is that there is another person of Heather during this cutscene. If the player were to hack the camera during this cutscene, you can find a floating head of Angela's character model. It's very weird and odd of a placement, disturbing even, as it's unexplainable as to why this is here. However, the reason why this is here is because Silent Hill 3 reuses assets from Silent Hill 2. Similarly, the character model for Harry Mason in Silent Hill 3 is a reused asset model of James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2. Blaze of Glory. In Silent Hill 2, when James encounters Laura in Lakeview Hotel, he receives Laura's letter. The model for Laura's letter appears to have different text transcribed on the paper as opposed to what the player reads when first received. This text, when translated, is an altered version of the song Blaze of Glory by American singer Jon Bon Jovi. Minmo. Minmo is an advertisement that you can find in Silent Hill 3 at the subway level. While here, you can find a picture of cat food advertised as a healthy product to feed to your cat, by food manufacturer Minmo Cat Foods. Alessa made the boiler explode. Before the events of Silent Hill 1, it's claimed that the Gillespie household burned down due to a boiler explosion, which in turn caused the fire that produced harmful side effects on Alessa's body, as she was caught in the crossfire, being burnt alive. Because of this, she would be transferred to Alchemilla Hospital, where she lived for 7 years of her life, recovering from her wounds, but also bedridden and kept forcefully from her mother, Dahlia Gillespie. While this is a known fact, there have been fan theories regarding the boiler incident being caused by Alessa herself. It's theorized that the cause of the fire was due to Alessa's intense psychic energy, causing the boiler to explode. On the other side of the coin, fans claim that this is false, as this is contradicted by the official guidebook and the Lost Memories Silent Hill Chronicle. These sources state that the cause of the boiler incident was due to the ritual itself which produced the fire. Maria's birth in the intro. I am not sure as to what this entry is referring to when it comes to Maria's birth in the intro of Silent Hill 2, but if I were to guess, I'm assuming it's referring to the scene here, where Maria is lying on her side in Heaven's Night, as the exact moment when she was born. There's also Born from a Wish, which gives a prologue to the main story, Letter from Silent Heaven. This could also allude to Maria being birthed by the town of Silent Hill itself, wished subconsciously from James himself as a reincarnation of Mary. Halo of the Sun runes. The Halo of the Sun is a recurring symbol that is usually associated with the religious cult, the Order. The symbol is more cryptic and complex as it contains many details in the inner and outer circles. The most notable aspects are the runes itself. These runes at first glance are hard to determine what they symbolize, but in reality, many of these runes are correlated with the natural elements that constitute an important foundation in cosmology. The Order's three main elements are rust, blood, and light. But the main idea behind the Halo of the Sun is to be a symbol of worship when it comes to representing the Order's depiction of their idea of God. Gonna Beach in the Sea. In Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 3, when in Brookhaven Hospital at the reception office, the player can find a poster with a red cross at the top, with a message underneath that reads, Gonna Beach in the Sea. This is most likely a grammar and misspelling error on the developer's part that the fandom made into a joke amongst each other, trying to decipher the meaning behind the message. Tom Hewlett's Lies. Tom Hewlett is a former employee of Konami who worked as an associate producer for Silent Hill Origins, producer for Silent Hill Shadow Memories, and Silent Hill Downpour, along with various other Western Silent Hill games before leaving in 2013. During his time at Konami, Tom Hewlett was seen as the role of the main director of the Silent Hill franchise. Because of this, lots of fans at the time blamed Tom Hewlett for the outcome of the later installments post-Team Silent, to the extent to which he received death threats from certain fans and overall toxic verbal abuse. In reality, much of Tom's role was limited due to Konami. At the end of the day, Konami had the final word on the matter at hand. Tom Hewlett states this on a Ask Me Anything on Reddit back in 2016. Of course, it was daunting stepping up to the franchise. Be aware, I was never the man in charge of Silent Hill, as I've explained above. Whether I was assisting or producing, I did my best to be an advocate in the interest of the Silent Hill series and its fans. This did not mean ask what the fans want and do that, but make decisions I felt fans would especially enjoy, or would enhance their experience with Silent Hill. Real-world dog-killing audio file. As disturbing and unsettling as this entry is, I couldn't find anything relating to a real-world dog-killing audio file regarding any of the Silent Hill games that could have potentially used such audio. I'm assuming that one of the Silent Hill games that do contain dogs as enemies could refer to their death sound effect being reused audio of an actual dog dying, but this sounds like speculation as I couldn't find any proof of evidence. Stephen Street. As far as I'm aware, Stephen Street is not a street in Silent Hill. If we take a look at the maps, they seem to not contain any mention of Stephen Street. However, if this entry is referring to Stephen King, the American novelist, then there are a couple of references to him throughout the game, such as the red rum seen on the garage door. Pyramid Head blinks. After some research, I couldn't find any information regarding Pyramid Head blinking. The only information that I gathered was from the Dead by Daylight subreddit. Supposedly, Pyramid Head can actually get stunned by a flash in-game which temporarily blinds him. With this in mind, this led to questions about the logic behind Pyramid Head, as he has a pyramid-shaped helmet over his head. Kaufman has been forging autopsies. Michael Kaufman, the director of Alchemilla Hospital, is closely associated with the Order and is speculated to forge autopsies, specifically the death of Alessa after the boiler incident. Because of Kaufman's association of distributing illegal drugs, blackmailing Lisa Garland, and being an accomplice in Alessa's torture, he is more than willing to forge her autopsy report when it comes to faking her death. Closer is a mall cop. This is quite an odd entry as I couldn't find any mention of the Closer being a mall cop, but I'm assuming at some point, fans speculated that the symbolism behind the Closer is that of a mall cop, possibly because the Closer is active throughout the Central Square shopping center and happens to patrol the premises, much like a mall cop would do. This also could be more likely an inside joke from the community and not to be taken seriously. Angela's hearing aid. A very obscure detail that is not widely known is that Angela has a hidden texture on her left ear. It's assumed that this could be a hearing aid as it may look similar to that of one, but in reality, it's most likely a hairpin to hold her hair back. Alessa's impregnation. It's known that the ritual Alessa's mother performed, Dahlia Gillespie, was to impregnate her daughter with a god, so Alessa could give birth to a god that would cleanse the earth and reborn the world without pain or suffering. However, this entry seems to imply that Alessa's impregnation has a darker and sinister turn, as it could be misinterpreted that Alessa was assaulted physically and forcefully. However, this isn't the case, as Alessa was able to have this god impregnated inside of her because of her psychic powers that allow this ritual to be successful. Store name changes. In pre-release screenshots for Silent Hill 2, there were images of a street named Old Nelly Street. Initially, the buildings and store names were different in the beta build in comparison to the final release. This street was ultimately scrapped and altered to be changed to the Nelly Street we see in the final release. However, one can question as to why this change happened. One of the realistic answers is that the store buildings and names were changed due to the similarities being based on a real-life street in San Bruno, California. With using actual stores comes legality issues, as Konami would have to make agreements with San Bruno City Council for image appropriation. Miriam K equals Miriam Locane. In Silent Hill 2, before the boss fight with Eddie, James finds himself in a graveyard. In this graveyard, you can find a gravestone that reads Miriam K, Traitor. It's up to interpretation as to who Miriam K could be, as this person is never once mentioned anywhere else. However, it's speculated that Miriam K is Miriam Locane, the unfortunate victim alongside her twin brother, who were murdered by Walter Sullivan. You can find this in a newspaper in a dumpster at Woodstead Apartments. As to why her initials are Miriam K and not Miriam M is possibly due to a translation error. Hometown is the story of the There Was a Hole Here guy. In the Silent Hill 3 soundtrack called Hometown, a rendition of the Silent Hill theme from Silent Hill 1 is possibly connected to There Was a Hole Here message. I'm assuming that somewhere in the lyrics there is a mention of holes and that possibly being correlated to James Sunderland. However, I don't see any mention of this. Valtiel equals Saint Nicholas. It's theorized that Valtiel is connected to Saint Nicholas. Both are descendants of their god, who they serve to worship and pay loyalty to. Valtiel observes hither to ensure the birth of God. However, this connection between the two isn't confirmed to be true. First coming during Civil War. According to Silent Hill history, in 1861, the American Civil War broke out, influencing the development of Silent Hill for the duration of the conflict. This led to a prison camp converted into Toluca Prison after the Civil War. Native Americans ended organized resistance, and people all over Silent Hill started to disappear. This could be the catalyst for the events we see in the mainline installments that unravel. Sulfuric acid torture. There is a theory that the torture that Alessa experienced was also attributed to the use of sulfuric acid, a contribution to the burning of Alessa's skin. The purpose of this sulfuric acid was to weaken Alessa by preventing the barrier between herself and her other half, Cheryl Mason, from reconnecting and returning to one another. If the souls of Alessa and Cheryl are recombined, this will lead to the birth of God. However, I don't see any mention of the sulfuric acid being used as a torture method. Frank Sunderland is Walter's father. In Silent Hill 4, if the player were to read Frank Sunderland's diary, it's discovered that before the events of Silent Hill 4, he discovered a baby in room 302 and gave him to the nearby St. Jerome's Hospital. This baby would be Walter Sullivan, the main antagonist in Silent Hill 4. Frank suspected that the baby's parents may have had financial troubles or had gotten themselves into danger. Because of this, he kept the baby's umbilical cord in his room for over 34 years because he felt that it was too precious to throw out. As to how Frank would be connected to Walter as his father, whether biological or adopted, is beyond me. But I suppose if you look at it from a perspective where Frank keeping the umbilical cord is in a poetic and wholesome way, keeping an essence of Walter Sullivan with him, that being his innocence, fathering the umbilical cord, if you will. And that is the Silent Hill Iceberg Explained. This took lots of time to put together, with extensive research unraveling lots of the obscure and unknown facts that I myself even learned something new from. So I hope my effort in covering this entire iceberg was done well and worthwhile. Anyways, that's me. Thank you for watching, please have a great day, stay safe, and goodbye.